Hello, it's great to be here today and talking with you all. So my name is Mike Best. I'm a Master of Wine and work here at Boutinot. And I am joined today by JD Rousseau, the head winemaker of the Wildeberg project in South Africa. And what we're going to do today is we're going to start to understand a bit about the story behind the Wildeberg project, behind the farm, and perhaps most interestingly of all, behind the vineyards of South Africa and the vineyards that make up Wildeberg. So JD joins us from the midst of harvest, and he is he's been dealing with the long days and the stressful situations that come with harvest. So we're very privileged to have him here again to talk to us during this time. So JD, if you could just introduce yourself for those of you who don't know us.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Okay, so my name is JD Rousseau. I'm the winemaker at Wildeberg, which is a farm in Franschhoek, in the coastal region of South Africa. It's about 2 hours drive from Cape Town. Just a little bit of background on Wildeberg. We started developing the farm about 4 years ago. Our first plantings, we first planted 4 hectares of 4 different varietals. Girif or Petit Syrah as known, Syrah, Semillon and Chardonnay. And we are quite proud of the vineyards because this year, 2021 is the first harvest from the farm. But saying that, we also go out into the greater coastal region to places like Paarl, Stellenbosch, even as far as Piccaninny's Kloof, which is about 3 hours from the farm. Just to go out and look for this amazing vineyards and to try and express the vineyards in the wines.
Yeah. So that's the intro to the Wildeberg story, which is one I am absolutely in love with and very keen to explore more. What I wanted to do, maybe quite a lot of people have joined us for a lot of the sessions, and what I wanted to do was to slow the pace down a little bit and to take. It's just the two of us, so we get that chance to have a bit more time to discuss it. But if we could imagine, what we would love to do, of course, is to take you to Wildeberg, and so that you could come to the farm and that we could go to the vineyards and really explore them. Unfortunately, we can't do that, but we're going to try to do that through this conversation. So going to the estate, and you can imagine for those of you who are joining who are involved in the trade, either as buyers or as journalists or anything in the wine industry, when you go on visits, you go to the winery, and often the visit can take place in the winery, so that you get shown to the cellar, and this is the press, and these are the barrels, and do a tasting. But if you really want to see the heart of the operation, I think that is absolutely in the vineyards. So I will show you that from the sort of humble beginnings of the estate, which is in this absolute idyllic site with the clouds rolling over the mountain there, which is a very sort of typical scene for a day at Wildeberg. But this is a photo from some years ago, and the estate is continuing to be improved and invested in. So when you do get to visit, if you haven't yet been, you'll see a much sort of more improved and bigger estate. But the thing is, you could spend the time there and have an amazing time. You will be hosted really well. There's some lovely people to sort out the hospitality and so on, and do a great tasting. But realistically, the best thing to do would be to get in the car and ask JD, can we go and see the vineyards? Is to get in JD's truck and say, let's go and see the vineyards, and let's talk about the Wildeberg story, and let's talk about South African wine and where all this fits in. So I thought that would be the best thing to do, really. And in that, I've had those experiences before of going to wineries to do that, and it just makes, generally speaking, I think it makes people much more comfortable, because I think winemakers like to talk a lot more about the vineyards maybe than we ask them. We ask them all the time, how is the wine made? What barrels is it in? Was it wild yeast or added yeast or malo or not malo? But really, what matters the most is those raw ingredients. So JD, if we were imagining that we were going to sort of get in that in that car. What was your introduction to the Wildeberg story? What were you doing before, and what sort of excited you about jumping in on this project? That's probably the first question to ask you.
Sure, I think, Mike, it's important to just say when we started off with Wildeberg, we had absolutely no idea what to plant, even what to make, or what wines to make. So, and we sit around actually the table where I'm at now in the house at Wildeberg, and we said, listen, going forward, we really need to believe in the product that we make, and we really need to fall in love with these vineyards that we get the grapes from. So it's not making another Sauvignon and making another Chenin from South Africa or Shiraz. I think there's quite enough out there already, and great examples. It was literally going out, and over the past years, experience that I had, or Reino had, or even Boutinot in South Africa had, it's just this vineyards that we worked with, and going out and applying our winemaking philosophy to this vineyards, and just to give them a voice and say, listen, yeah, this is amazing Chenin vineyard from Paul, and we want the wine. When you taste the wine, it must take you back to that vineyard, and this is the best way to express that vineyard. And as we go through this, call it the journey, as you said, it's just to show you this really, truly amazing vineyards that we work with. From a winemaking perspective, we call it lazy winemaking. We're really not trying to work anything too hard or try to panel beat a wine in a way that we think it needs to taste. So it's literally all the work goes into the vineyard, take it back to the winery, natural fermentations, the red, we can talk later. We do whole berry fermentations, just gives you a softer palate, and also more red fruits on the nose, but we can talk later on that. And that's it. Prior to bottling, it's a coarse filtration and in the bottle. So it's really to express this sense of place and this vineyards, the amazing vineyards that we work with.
And it sounds like you have quite a lot of, autonomy in the sense of the styles of wine that you are making there. So how do you feel about that?
Stylistically, I think expressing older vineyards. So we love working with old vineyards. We are a member of the Old Vine Project, which is a great initiative in South Africa, trying to keep all these old vines, 35 years and older, in the soil. Otherwise, just it gets lost in the bigger blends and stuff like that. So we really focus on old vines, but not all old vines make great wines. So it's not like we just go blindly and this is the amazing vineyard. And then on the reds, we prefer more the elegance and finesse rather than extraction and big and bold reds with a lot of new oak. So I think in a nutshell, that's the two stylistically that we, and texture is also a big thing for us on whites, and then more elegance and finesse on the reds.
But where did you get that inspiration from, or that influence to sort of push towards that winemaking path, or that stylistic desire?
Sure, tough questions today, Mike. Okay, no, like yesterday, but no, not everybody's there. Is when I actually started in the wine industry about, say, 15, 16 years ago, harvest. I came back from America, I did a harvest there in Napa Valley. And I started at a producer, actually, that was working, one of the first producers working with Boutinot. But obviously back then, didn't know 15 years later, I would be winemaker at the home of Boutinot of Wildeberg in South Africa. And I remember then making the wine and learning about natural fermentation. The first time I've ever saw a 600 liter barrel and how to work with barrel, how to work with lees. So we're not scared to work with lees. Just saying that for the public out there, it's just, it gives you more mouthfeel, it gives you more structure. So we don't do squeaky clean wines. We don't do very aromatic showstopper wine. So we focus on this texture, we focus on this personality of the wines.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting for me. I'm always sort of gunning on that focus of why and trying to get that sense of the story, because there's so much to unpack. And if I was sat in the car with you, I think I would annoy you all the time with questions about why does that happen? Why does that happen? A bit like a 6-year-old. And I know you've got a couple of young kids as well, which is just a bit of extra fun for you during harvest. And so one question before we get to the vineyard, as we're starting to approach it, I'm interested then, could you just give us a background to how does Wildeberg fit into the modern South African wine industry? Now, I know with the history and 1994 onwards, and so many things have happened and changed in a sort of 25, 30 year period. But it's a big question, and so I appreciate that we could spend an hour talking about that one subject alone or more. But how do you feel Wildeberg fits into this very colourful landscape of South African wine, with all its problems and all its greatness and everything? How does it? Where does it fit in the puzzle?
Is this now where I make like freezy face and I say, okay, cut?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think personally for me, if I think about the South African wine industry, and it's not really like that, but you get I'm talking about 20 years ago when my father was a farmer of grapes. You got two distinct. You got the estate, usually in Stellenbosch, the old family-owned estates, and you got a co-op, which was the big co-ops. A lot of farmers took their grapes to the co-op. And there was not really much in between the two. And I think about 10 years ago, it's a lot of names that you know, a lot of these independent guys start making wines. And I see there's a question from London, what is... they think about the old wine certification by the South African wines. And I think that also played a big part in coloring this between the two parts in, because people started to focusing on old vines. I saw the statistics yesterday is actually old vines in Paarl region are actually going up. So obviously every year more comes, but they don't rip it out anymore because they can actually, people are looking for this old vines and seeing the potential of this old vines as a single vineyard or as a blend in a wine. So for Wildeberg, I would say we sit in this more colorful middle. Like I said earlier, when we started with Wildeberg, we didn't have a blueprint and say this is what we need to do. We had absolutely no idea what to do. We started with this farm. We had a farm with, I think there was one horse walking around on the farm, and that's it. And then we set out to start making these wines, and I think we are quite proud of the wines that so far that we made and the quality that came out of Wildeberg.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, that's what I was really fascinated to see and to try and. As you say, that there's no recipe, and you're not trying to fit this necessarily into any category. It is what it is, and the wines express themselves. But there is also a bigger picture of the whole of the South African wine industry with its diversity and history and everything that plays a role in that. So it's just interesting to set it in context for everyone to understand a little more. So as we now then roll into our first vineyard, what site are we looking at here, and what does this give you? Where are we?
So this is actually the Wildeberg Semillon, harvested the first year this year. So I just finished fermentation in the barrels. You can see a nice rainbow at the bottom. It's just a great omen. So yeah, we're looking forward to take it through the process, and by the end of this year, we will understand more about the quality that's from the farm itself. So yeah, that's quite a cool project that we're working on.
So we're in Franschhoek. We're on the estate, and
we're on the estate. We're literally just in front of the house. On the estate.
Yeah, and how big is this little field that you have here?
So, well, the Semillon is about 1.4 hectares. We planted 2 clones, GD1 clone, which is more, the Hunter Valley clone, and then GD14 clone, which is more your California and UC Davis clone. It's just to give you more complexity and give you the blending options later on when you start blending for bottling.
Yeah, and when I was first reading wine books sort of 12 years ago or so, even then I would read that in those wine books that Semillon is a wine that is used to fill out blends, and it can be a high yielding variety which is inexpensive and used to fill out blends, but it's a bit neutral. and not very expressive. Would you say that's right?
Well, don't Google it now, but if you, I think more than 90% of the vines planted in the early 1900s in South Africa was Semillon. So my parents and grandfather, they call it wine grape. So that was actually what we grew up with. And my father used to say that's what put me through university and school. So, but obviously after phylloxera, after replantings, after the KWV quota system, it actually, people planted more and more Chardonnay, more and more Sauvignon Blanc, and even Chenin Blanc, which became more trendy. So today, I think it's less than 1% of vineyards planted, of Semillon planted. And luckily for us in Franschhoek, just the call it the terroir, just suits the varietal very good. And we also have around us this ancient, we can talk later, but this ancient bush vines that actually came through this whole phylloxera thing, which was planted in 1905 and then one in 1936 that we work with, which is quite privileged to work with these old vines.
I think that's an amazing thing that just in such a these grapes have a long history, and that people used to think a certain way about them, and now we are discovering, or maybe rediscovering, the quality of some of these sites, because of course, as you say, not all old vines make great wine, but there were a few gems in those sites that, with everything going to the co-op and being lost in big blends. So it must be a really nice thing to be able to uncover some of those and bring them to market. I think that when I was fortunate enough to visit in 2019 and asked JD what the best wine is that you can make here at Franschhoek, and he was very clear and didn't take long to answer and say Semillon. And that is, I think, really encouraging, because sometimes we get, and our answers where we think, try to be balanced and say, well, this is good here and that's good there. But in that particular block, in that site, you think it's really encouraging, and that we can have a focus and bring a spotlight on a variety which is overlooked but can produce some of the world's best white wines. So it must be nice to have that site there. So moving on then to our next set of photos. So what's the vineyard in the bottom left of the screen there?
So that's the first white we harvested this year, so called the Eensaamheid Farm. It's a Paul Chenin bush vine. And in the top left, you can see our Cowboy Crush project. So we don't have a full-on winery yet. That will come in the next few years, hopefully. So that's the winery. We are 3 guys working there. We call it our Cowboy Winery. And then, on the right top, you can see harvesting the Petit Syrah from the farm as well. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And so I'll just move on one slide. So we're still in the same vineyard there. Tell us a story about it. When was it planted, and what characters does it give you?
So with our terroir Chenin from Paul, you get 2 types of Chenins from Paul. You get the big shale soils where the roots go very deep in, and it just brings big bold Chenins. But we prefer the more, not lighter, but the more higher acidity, more freshness to the wine. And this is planted on granite soils. So there's actually a granite outcrop that runs from Table Mountain into the Agterparel, which is the back of the Paul Mountain. And this is a vineyard, unirrigated bush vine, planted in 1977. So you get this natural concentration from the old vines, but you also get the freshness from the granite soils that it's planted on. And then you can see, I think this is the most important thing to do in any harvest is sampling. It looks boring, but just to taste the grapes and to look at the sugar and the analysis to make a decision when to harvest. I think that's the most crucial part of the job this time of the year.
Mm-hmm. And what's your guiding philosophy on that? What's important for you when you say, okay, now's the time?
Well, I think for whites and reds it will differ. On reds, we pick, well, actually on both, we pick slightly earlier than everybody else. It's because we have a lot of sunshine. We have a lot of heat sometimes in harvest time, but it's just to capture the natural acidity. So as soon as you start losing acidity, it doesn't really matter on what alcohol percentage it happens. You need to start picking, because otherwise it just sits there and the acidity just goes down, and the sugar content, which means alcohol, will just go up. And the same on the reds. If you wait too long, you will lose this elegance and finesse. You will lose this red berries, the spiciness, that type of flavor, and it will become more towards the bluer, blacker, like plum, blackcurrant, that flavors. And even if you wait too long, it will become jammy, which is undrinkable at the end of the day. So yeah.
Okay. And what is it about Chenin? What's that is exciting to work with as a variety? Because it seems like it can come in lots of different styles. So what is it that you particularly enjoy about making terroir Chenin, or what does it give you?
Well, like you said earlier, I think the diversity of South Africa, and I think also the diversity of Chenin Blanc, where it's planted and what soils it plants. In a vineyard, you can make different wines. And it really shines where it's planted and that. And also you can make different styles. You can make from a sparkling wine to a still wine. Wooded, it works well with oak. But also you can make a sweet wine or a straw wine. So yeah, I think the diversity of Chenin Blanc makes it popular. But also I think the big thing why Chenin in South Africa is because it belongs. If you look at the droughts that we had from, when was it, 17, 18 and 19, it was Chenin that just put up his hand and say, listen here, still amazing quality. And so I think it belongs, and that makes it much easier for the winemaker to make great wines from it. Yeah,
I can really appreciate how the drought tolerance of the variety is something that maybe is not necessarily known about, but is hugely important. And it's I think that one thing that I've noticed, from Boutinot with this international experience that we have, that in some of the warmer vintages in the Loire Valley, particularly in 2018, that maybe some of those guys don't have quite the same experience of dealing with the warm temperatures. So I've definitely been surprised that actually there's been more freshness in many South African Chenins than I've tried than the Loire Valley Chenins, which is not how it would appear in a textbook on a piece of paper when people start talking about, what the climate is. So being adapted to that, I think, is really fascinating. And but why is the old vine thing important? Why does that matter from a quality point of view? I mean, why do the old vines give you better wine, and how do the grapes look different, or how do you see it sort of manifesting itself?
Well, I don't think, like I said earlier, I don't think old vines gives better quality, to be honest. I think sometimes old vines get to a point where, and if they're not planted on the right site or not good viticultural practices, they need to be ripped out. That's unfortunately part of the game. But some of the vines, when they get older, your yield starts dropping. And then for a commercial farmer that works with this old vines, before the old vine project, we just ripped out blindly. So I can remember my previous, where I worked as a winemaker, we made this first reserve, as you want to call it, Chenin Blanc from this old vine. And that was before the old vine project. And the next year, I don't know what happened, there was no communication. The next year we wanted to make the wine, it was ripped out. And we were like, no. So I think with this old vine project, it's just focusing and just keeping the right old vines in the soil. So there's actually a website. You're a member as a winemaker, you're a wine producer, you're a member, and then also as a producer of the grapes, you're a member. So it's just bringing these two together, and it's a platform to talk about it and say, listen here, why it's better, sometimes better than younger vines. Like I said, it's lower yield. It's been there for ages. It's seen droughts. It's seen wet vintages. It's seen cold and hot. So I think it's much more in balance. And once again, if you look at like the drought, the earlier drought, it's just the Semillon, especially the Semillon block, yield-wise, it was stable. Quality-wise, it was stable. So it's just great to work with a vineyard where going in exactly almost what you're going to get out of that grapes that year. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's incredibly interesting. I think it's brilliant that you've got this sort of natural bounty, and that now with the heritage certification able to preserve them. And I certainly enjoy drinking them, and I try to impress on everybody who I meet that they should be enjoy drinking them. And so maybe we'll see more of them. So I hope so. Okay. So rumbling on down the lane. This is still in the same place, but this just looks like an incredible scene. Where remind us again exactly which wine region we're in, and what are we looking at here?
So yeah, we're still in Paul. So we're still at the same vineyard than the previous photos. There was actually a big fire again in Franschhoek, Stellenbosch area, which is, if you look at your screen on the right hand side. So that morning it was just all the smoke coming down far in the on the mountains, and it was just as the sun rise, it was just a beautiful photo, picking the grapes.
And this vineyard has a name in English, or is it? Or what would be the name? What would be the name in English rather than Afrikaans?
Well, it's actually called Loneliness. In this picture, it actually looks quite lonely, but it's not.
I think that's it's. I can see why, but the wine is quite. It's certainly something that can perk you back up again. So maybe that's a nice thing in the balance there. Okay, and another picture of harvest time, and it's a lot of work. Hey, having to do all these bush vines and everything by hand. And what about the crews who you have working for you? Sort of how does that work in terms of managing to get the fruit in and everything?
Well, we worked with some of the producers now long before we even started with Wildeberg. So they know the quality that we want. We have a friendly relationship. We harvest all our whites literally almost before 10 a.m. in the morning, just to bring it as good as possible in the. So now I must say that side of the harvest, it's quite a pleasure to working with these guys, and it's a fun part of the harvest time.
Yeah. Why is it important to harvest early in the morning?
Well, first of all, if you want to whole bunch press, your grapes, like, it can get to 45 degrees Celsius in February, which is the peak of the harvest in South Africa. And when you bring it into the winery and you want to press this hot grapes, you just will oxidize the juice from the start. And so bringing it cool, it's just, you get more greener juice, you keep this the precursors of the aromas, and you just you start with a cooler fermentation. So it's just beneficial in the southern hemisphere.
Yeah. So all these important attention to detail, which clearly makes a huge difference in the final thing when we talk about very nuanced and subtle flavors. So really interesting to hear about that as well. And you assure me that actually it is in color. This is actually just a black and white photo, but it looks like a sort of really imposing landscape. And where have we moved to now? Which vineyard is this?
So now we're actually in Stellenbosch, or the sub-region is called Boutinot in Stellenbosch. To be honest, this is the most amazing vineyard I've ever worked with in my life. It's literally you have to have a 4x4 to get up there. It's where there's like all the vineyard stops, and then it's like a forest, and it's a small patch of vineyards of this vineyard on top of the mountain. It's about 550 meters above sea level. Some of the highest Sauvignon Blanc in the area, and to the right you can actually see Table Mountain in Cape Town from far. So like I said, Sauvignon Blanc that goes into our terroir range. It was irrigated back in the days, but there was a fire about 7 years ago and it burned all the irrigation pipes, and we just left it like that. So now it's an unirrigated vineyard. And once again, like all the wines we make, this is just screams that site. So wine-wise, we make it stainless steel. So we naturally ferment it in tank, and then we leave it for 9 months on the lees prior to bottling.
Okay, and what sort of style can we expect for people who haven't tasted it? What does the site give you in terms of the way the wine tastes?
So, Mike, we're in the Northern Hemisphere. You usually sometimes, we talked about earlier yesterday also about the acidity. So once again, in South Africa, that's not really something that we talk about, or high acidity we talk about. And this vineyard, we usually wait for the acidity to come down to a certain drinkability before we harvest. So definitely super fresh style. But for me, there's a lot of minerality in the wine. There's almost, I don't know if you know the herb is buchu. It's you get it in South Africa. It's always sometimes high up in the mountains. It's planted, but it's like a herb you get also on the nose. Okay. But yeah, it's all about the mouthfeel and all about the minerality and texture in the wine. Yeah.
So it's not the. How would you say then it would be maybe different to some of the coastal sites, say like a Sauvignon Blanc from Somerset West or something like that? How would it compare in stylistically as a wine?
Well, if you look at the world and the big guns in Sauvignon, which is New Zealand Marlborough and Sancerre, I would say it will be, for me personally, I would say it will be leaning more towards Sancerre than to Marlborough. It's not like I said earlier, it's not in your face, a lot of grapefruit and a lot of like that. So it's much more subdued on the nose, but all about the palate and all about the mouthfeel.
Yeah. Wow, amazing! It's absolutely just the visuals of that site are incredible, and for a variety which is sometimes, as you say, it can be something which is just about pure tropical fruit, but actually to get sort of the texture, the intensity, the minerality, I think is that's a really sort of fascinating thing for Sauvignon Blanc, and shows that there's a huge depth to it as a variety. So it's a wine which I have. I'm looking forward to talking about more, really, and something that I think will be a really interesting project. But you don't always know these things until you see pictures like this and hear this story that it's actually how important that is and how much there is to it. So that's incredible. And that's the picture there of the label and the 4x4 that you used to get up there, I suppose.
Yeah, no, definitely.
You're going to need that. So, okay, so getting back in the car and moving on to our next vineyard site. This is it's strange to think that these scrubby little bush vines are responsible for something so amazing. But where have we gone to now, and which vineyard are we stood in?
So we're actually quite close to Wildeberg again. This is vineyard close to us. It's planted in 1905. So you can look at that vineyard. It almost looks dead, super low yield, but it just brings this gives you this amazing wine year after year. And the left-hand corner, you can see a red grape, which is called actually Semillon Gris, which is a mutation, a natural mutation in the old vineyards. So after a few, I don't know how many years, the vineyards start mutating and it starts going this red. So we actually harvest all the white and the red or the gris together to make the Wildeberg white.
Is that does that happen year to year, or does that happen once and then it's that from then on?
No, year to year. So in this vineyard, it's about 2% of the vines already, and like I said, it's now 116 years old. The vineyard. So it's about 2%, usually 2 to 5% in this old Semillon vineyards.
Yeah, it is almost like magic. It's they're absolutely incredible things. And when you talk about low yields, can you give us any sort of idea of like how big is the site and how many bottles can you make from it as a sort of rough estimate?
A little bit more than 900, like in 2020, Mike. No, it's quite a big vineyard. It's about 4 hectares, but like I said, the yield is some years 1 ton per hectare, some years maximum 2 tons per hectare. So we're talking about not a lot of wine, but say max, I would say 3,000 to 5,000 bottles in a good year if it's according to plan. But usually it's very low.
And is there a reason like why the yield changes so much from year to year, or is what would be the main reasons why that is?
No, I don't really think it changes a lot. If you look at it, okay, you can say 1 to 2 tons. That's half of the yield. It's just sadly a lot of the vines will die back, will die, and that will impact your yield. And then it's just rain. Then if you, depending on your rain season, your winter season, so it gets quite technical. But it's quite in that bracket, 1 to 2 tons. I would say it's year after year.
Yeah, amazing. It must be a real treasure to work with these with these old vines. And so we're still in the same field here. This is what we're looking at, that semi-en bloc.
No. This is actually back in Paul. So with the terroir Chenin, yeah. So terroir Chenin, we also work with a different vineyard than Eensaamheid. It's called Uitkyk. Once again, it's also planted in 1977. So and also on granite soils, just to give you that flintiness in the wine.
Yeah, amazing. And I guess it must be really interesting to get to know each site and just what they can give you when they can be put together within in the same wine, and remarkable that they can sort of produce something consistent from year to year in terms of knowing what that's going to be for the blend. So are there any? Just wanted to ask you about some of the red wine projects that you have. What kind of characteristics are you looking for the varieties that you grow? So I know we grow some Malbec, some Cabernet Franc, and so on. And what are you looking for from those vineyards?
Well, if you look at the Wildeberg Red, which is mostly Syrah from Franschhoek, and especially from the Boutinot area where we are at, it's quite different from the rest of the Syrah coming out of South Africa. It's lighter in color, it's more elegant, but what we're after, it's this more spicy cinnamon flavors. And the blend is actually with a blob of Cabernet Franc. So on paper, it doesn't make any sense at all, the blend. But it just worked, and we decided this is what we want to do, and this is what we believe in. From the Malbec and the Cabernet Franc, once again, if you look at the appellations in South Africa, where I would say Stellenbosch is renowned for their Bordeaux varietals, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, all the Merlot, etc. But in Franschhoek also is especially Cabernet Franc and Malbec does very well. But Malbec, saying Malbec, I'm meaning more a lighter style of Malbec. So it's not this big, bold Malbec. And then Cabernet Franc, also you get more the linearity in the Cabernet Franc, which works. The two works quite nicely together in a blender.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And I just scooch on to this picture here. I think that why did you choose that particular picture of that bunch of grapes? What's exciting for you looking at that as a winemaker?
No, it's just to show. I think if you look at white, I don't know if you've got a red picture here later on, but if you look at white, we always joke in the winery, we say the uglier the grapes look for white wine, the better the wine will be at the end. Where if you come to red wine, it must look textbook for it to be top quality. So I think that's the reason why we put that in here. So you can see at the little bit of sunburn, like a sun kiss, it just gives you more that nice flavors and complexity to the wine. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And sort of bunch-wise, that seems like something that sort of sits in your hand as a relatively small bunch of grapes, whereas some bunches in different vineyards around the world can be enormous, like more than you could hold in one hand. So is that kind of responsible for some of the intensity and the zestiness of the wine, or how is he sort of encouraged to see the small bunches? Is that something that happens year after year?
Yeah, well, if you go back to the old wine conversation again, that's definitely what they give you. It's small berries, small bunches, super concentration, and also natural acidity, a higher natural acidity, because the yield is quite low in the older vines. Yeah, so yeah, definitely.
And this is just a couple of shots of the sites, but and the harvest. And where are you hammering a post into the ground on the right hand side? Where is that?
So some of the vineyards outside of Franschhoek, where we don't buy the whole block. So we work with, say, 5 or 6 sometimes different winemakers or wineries. So you have to say, okay, this 2 rows is mine, and you work with the producer and say, okay, this is what we want you to do, and what do you think? And then when harvest times come, just to make sure your grapes are still on the vines when you get there. Otherwise, it's just somebody else harvested before you, or something gets mixed up. So yeah, that's a Cinsault. There's actually a old vine Cinsault block. That's the first year this year that we work with, just to test the quality and see what that gives us. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, and I think that it's interesting, sort of, looking at those things and how specific you can get with looking at those raw materials and what it is that you're after. So we've done that. So a drive through the vineyards, and now if we were coming back on the way back to the winery, I'd just like to touch just onto some of the winemaking philosophy that you've spoken about. So I know you said it's about the lazy winemaking and the fact that you've got these incredible sites. So if you've got these wonderful berries, there's not a lot that needs to happen. But what is it that you are? What are some of the important techniques, for is the right question, to create that style of wine that you're looking for? If you could just give us a run through your winemaking process, I think that would be really interesting.
So I think the most important thing, like you said, is definitely the grapes, definitely the site, and then working with these old vines on the right site, which is quite important. Bringing it back to the winery, we don't want to be stuck in a winery in harvest time the whole time. We want to be out there. We want to be in these vineyards, taste the vineyards, learning more about the vineyards. And usually when you're out there, you stumble across this more amazing vineyards that you want to work. And that's how you start building something. But taking it back to the winery on whites, we do the pressing. We just settle for 2 days into barrels, and that's, I think, the second most important thing for us is barrels. So we use only 600 and 500 liter barrels in the winery, and then we naturally ferment it. We leave it literally in the barrel for 9 months after fermentation, and then we do a coarse filtration after blending into the bottle. On the reds, we also do natural fermentation. On the Rhone varietals, we do a lot of whole cluster fermentation, 30 to 50%, depending on the year. And then we don't crush our berries. So the reason for that is we in South Africa, you must remember. So we've got a lot of sunshine, we've got heat. So we've got all this extraction, we've got all this tannins already in the grapes. So what we believe in our style is really to make a more softer, with structure, with balance, but a more softer approach to Cabernet Franc, to Malbec, and even to Syrah. So, and also while fermenting inside the berry, it just gives you more this red berry flavors, almost like a candy floss flavors that you get on the nose, and also the softer, more juicier tannins. Also, then going into older barrels, and depending on the wine, where Coterie, the Cabernet Franc Malbec is 18 months in barrel, and the Wildeberg Red is 9 months in barrel. So then we will taste them, and also just a coarse filtration. Like I said, it's very simple. It's very basic winemaking, but like the rest of the year, we're out in the vineyards, working the vineyards and looking for this amazing vineyards. Yeah.
And but with that though, there are some. You're quite set on the philosophy. You sort of found quite quickly, I would say, some of the techniques that really work for you. And even though those sites are individual, there's definitely a thread across all the wines which I think you make, which identify them with sort of. It does have your signature on them somewhere at the bottom. It's not a huge brand written across the front, so to speak. But there's definitely a little signature that that you had this sort of intention to make it. Just touching back on the whites, why is it important that you press straight to barrel? Why is that something that that is important for you with winemaking?
Well, I think just to go back to your comment earlier, is I think for us as a winemaking team, our biggest dream is when we do 10 harvests, just to get, hopefully this whole COVID thing is done, and then everybody can be here on the stoop, and we do a nice vertical tasting. And over the 10 vintages, you can see this golden thread that runs through the wines, not like overtaking the wines, because like if you add yeast, if you add too much to a wine, why do you spend all this time looking for the special vineyards, looking for this old vineyards or this amazing site? When you take it to the winery, you just add yeast that just brings something other stuff to the wine. So I think for us, it's to keep it simple. We try to ferment, like you said, slightly dirtier. The only thing there is just to give this more the sense of place and just more texture and more. We also ferment slightly hotter. And just the reason is we don't want a squeaky clean wine that's made in a winery. It must be made from the vineyard or in the vineyard for that matter.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. I think it's just fascinating to hear how because even though you are letting those vineyards speak for itself, there is a way which you choose to do that. And even though those grapes have the potential to give you wines with great texture, you are kind of encouraging them, I suppose, by having more solids in the fermentation and pressing straight to barrel and the hotter fermentation, as you say. I think that there's a real elegance to the reds, and that makes sense with your sort of whole cluster and whole berry style of wine. So if anyone thinks that South African red wines are all about bruising power, well, you need to try the reds from the Wildeberg estate in order to see that they can do elegance, even though you might not think so. If you look at their front row in rugby, there is still some elegance and freshness and purity to be found in these red wines. So, what about a quick question that we got coming in from Poland? Speaking about all this and all these sites, JD, what is the wine that you've made that you're most proud of? Not necessarily your best, not necessarily the one that sells the most, but what's the wine you've made that you're most proud of?
I would say most proud of, but for various reasons, would be the first Wildeberg Red that we made, because it was so atypical, South African first of all, but the blend also was just working. And then, not to talk shows and stuff like that, because that's not what we are about. But it won in the top 12 Shiraz challenge in South Africa, the top best Shiraz in South Africa. So we were sitting there in this tasting, and the guy that was actually presenting this wine was actually saying, "Oh, well, this controversial wine that we have here," and they pull it out, and it was actually the Wildeberg Red, and just put such a big smile on us. We're not trying to be different all the time and trying to be difficult all the time, but it's like I said, we're not trying to make another Syrah, we're not trying to make another Sauvignon. It's just our stamp, just to put our stamp or the vineyard stamp on a bottle and say, "Poof, this is what the vineyard gave you this year." So I would say, definitely, the Wildeberg, the first bottling of the Wildeberg Red was quite a cool project for us. Yeah.
That's amazing. I think it's so encouraging when I see people, we're so often in business and in life, looking over our shoulder or seeing what the guy down the road's doing and comparing ourselves to one another, instead of thinking, well, what can I do which is the best for me, or the best of that I can be, without trying to be anyone else. And it might be that I end up doing something really crazy and wacky, but you know what? That's okay, because I'm not doing that for the sake of it. I'm not doing that to stand out for the sake of saying, "Hey, look at me," but or to raise any eyebrows, other than the sense that we're trying to make a good wine. And I know I'm going to have to embarrass you a little bit, but you've also got some great scores from Tim Atkin. He's a Master of Wine, English wine journalist, and writes a rather comprehensive report on South African wine. How influential is his wine report, do you think, in terms of people looking at that as a guide and keeping people up to date in South Africa?
Well, I think it's a great endorsement. To be honest, we're, like you said, we're not looking at the guy next door, or we're not making wine that we want to. And not wine. It's always nice to have a golden stamp or a golden star of your head. But I think if you read his whole report, as our product manager always say, he gets South Africa. And it looks almost like a CV of Wildeberg if you read that report. He talks about old vines. He talks about non-interventional winemaking. He just talks about not being different, but trying to give these vineyards a voice. And he also talks about planting what belongs. So luckily, before his report, we were already 4 years old, so we can't say we copied his reports. And really, if you look and you read this whole report, forget about the scores, and you read his whole report, it looks like a CV for Wildeberg, and which is quite cool. So no, we're quite proud of the scores and everything. So
yeah. No, I think that's great, and that's the way that those things were intended. It's not just a numbers game. It's not so many pounds or dollars for a particular score. You have to read the whole picture and see the whole piece. So I've certainly got a lot out of that report, and it's just a nice encouragement in the right way that, you know, we're working with these wines every day with our customers, and they're loving them, and it's that's a great thing to see. And then when you read the report, you see that these reviews and these scores have come in. It's just another little tick in the box, a little sort of nod. Oh yeah, that's good. That's good. You know, it's a nice thing that sort of encourages us, but is just something that sort of helps us on our way rather than influences us too much. So. Well, I guess now if I was at the farm and we tasted through and I'd been to see these amazing sites, and you know, I'd probably have to be rushing off to my next appointment, and as we did when we were allowed to, trying to fit too many visits in one day, and needing to rush off when there's always so much more to say and more questions and more barrels to taste and everything. So. Is there anything that we've missed out from the Wildeberg story, JD, before we go off? Is there anything else that you'd like to sort of maybe give us as a final comment? If not,
well, I think, but you can't do that over virtual, and the technology is smelling Veronica's food that she cooks for you when you come over, and just be in the winery, just listening to the sounds and this crazy wind blowing here, because Wildeberg is quite a crazy place. Just chop and change every day. It's different to be here. So hopefully we will have you back soon, and then you can actually smell and eat and taste this amazing food that Veronica prepares each day, and also come in the winery and just experience this amazing place.
I can confirm that on a cold March day in northern England, a braai on the step, looking over the vineyards and the wild mountain would definitely be a nice thing. So look, thank you so much for your time, and really great talking to you for me as and for, I'm sure, the whole audience who's tuned in to learn more about that amazing place. And now we'll let you get back to the press and to finishing off Harvest 2021. So thank you, JD.
Good. Thanks, Mike. Good to see you again.